Welcome to Art. I'm Mr. Horner. Today I'm going to be talking about sketching. Sketching is kind of like fast drawing. We sketch when we want to get an idea or something that we saw down on a paper really quickly before we forget or it goes away. Even if you want to take your time to make a really nice drawing, I'll show you how a sketch can help start you off to get your image the right size and shape that you're going for. The best materials to have for this, for practicing your art, would be a sketchbook. I really want you to have, if you can, a sketchbook with no lines in it. This one here is from the Dollar Tree. It's $1 for this, and I've gone through a lot of these. I really like them. It's a great sketchbook to get for $1. If you don't have paper with no lines, you can use the inside of a box. This is a macaroni box. You could draw in here, or a paper grocery bag like this. This is what I'm going to draw on, and I'm going to use ballpoint pen. This is a blue pen. Just in case somebody out there doesn't have pencil, I want to show you, you don't have to have fancy materials, and the brown of the paper actually makes it look really cool and old, like it's a 100-year-old drawing. Makes it a little more interesting and beautiful. I highly encourage you to do this drawing on real paper or on cardboard rather than on the computer. We're spending so much time on the computer right now. I want you to get away from that and not make your art by pushing buttons, but to actually have a pencil in your hand and to feel it on the paper and practice this ancient art of creating pictures by hand. After you've watched this video and you're going to try sketching for yourself, I'd like you to choose either a stuffed animal or a shoe, because they have some interesting shapes to them and they'll work really well for practicing sketching with. Alright, I've set up my paper so that you can see it easily, but you can just put your paper on your table where you're drawing. And there's a couple of rules when we're doing observation drawing, when we're drawing things from real life. If we want it to turn out looking like it's really there, we need to leave the object sitting there, and I need to stay in one place. If I were to move around like this and look at different sides of Darla the dragon here, then she might turn out looking like, if I looked at her front this way when I drew her body, and then I look at her side of her head by moving around her, in the drawing she might look like she's twisted or flattened or something. That's why we want to make it look like she's really there, so we just leave her in one spot, and if I stay in one spot, we'll have one view of her and it'll look like she's just sitting there. Now when we start, this is a rule for any kind of drawing. I always say start light. That means you're not pushing hard with your pen or pencil. You're just kind of skimming the paper. So when we start to do a sketch, we're looking at the simplest shapes and the most important shapes first. So that means I would say her body looks very round to me. I'm going to start with a circle. So I would look at the shape of the body here, and then I'd go over and build that onto the paper here. Just a light circle over there. Next, her head is also very noticeable. And I'm making these about the same size as she is in real life. It's nice that I have a grocery bag. It's a nice big paper, so I can do that. And this circle is a little bit in front of the body circle. That's about here. And when you're sketching, you're drawing light, and I'm not going to erase anything. I'm just going to leave these lines, and I think it looks cool to leave these working lines. So I also see her nose is very round. Going around, looking at more big important shapes, but I'm just putting circles. It's just a bunch of circles so far. You can get this arm, and just like I was when I was showing you in the other video when we're drawing, you can come over here, you can get the idea of the size and shape that you're going for, practicing, and then putting it in where you want it. Looking at that one, the other foot there, and we have the tail. See, that's kind of a triangle back here, and the wing. So as I'm making those shapes, I'm looking at Darla, I'm looking at the paper, going back and forth, lots of times every time I make a little shape. So we have our simple shapes there. Hopefully you can see that all right in the video. Now that we've done those simple shapes, we're going to start going back, and like we did in our contour drawing, or our observation breaking and building with lines drawing, we're going to go and look at a little line at a time. But we can go quick on this one because we've already made most of the shape. I'm going to start at the head, and I'm going to start making the shapes that I see. Some of them will land on the lines I've already made, and then some I'll need to go outside of those lines. And I'm making them a bit heavier now. I'm not drawing so light. I'm trying to show where I want things to be. You can look at the seam here, the seam on the head. Those little details, now that you can get them in the right place, will add a lot to your picture. And looking at the shape of her eyelid here, like this. And the eye is a circle, but it goes underneath there. So I'm paying attention to where I see those. Still drawing quickly, and I haven't erased anything. Just moving around, trying to connect things and build onto the shapes that we already made. See, the neck comes up underneath here and goes down to her belly. That's about here. That comes down, building onto those shapes. How about the wing? Can darken up those lines a little bit. And you maybe can't see, but I'm turning my head looking at the paper, turning to Darla, back to the paper, as I make a line. So I'm looking at this shape in her wing, I'm looking over here, looking back at the paper, looking back here. That way I'm not forgetting what the shape is. I'm paying attention as I'm drawing to what I'm trying to make here. You're going around, you're putting in those shapes closer to how they are in real life, being a little bit more careful as you go. Still not pushing super hard, but harder than the first round where you just did the basic shapes. And I'm looking back and forth, turning my head. Those are the things we're keeping in mind. The biggest mistake people make when they're drawing like this, they're practicing drawing like this, is they forget to look back at the object. And in case you're wondering why mine does look a bit different than the real thing, I'm looking a little bit to the left of the camera. You're kind of sitting to my right. So it's making the view of Darla a little bit different. And that's why it's important not to change where you're sitting, because it will change how the object looks.
And I don't want you to be scared about making a mistake on this. When we have something as like squishy and round and wrinkled as a stuffed animal, there's really not a lot that can go wrong, because without looking at the real thing and comparing them, your drawing is going to look really good. It's these, weird shapes. You can't really copy them without, taking a long time, but nobody's going to know that those are just scribbled in there. They will look fine. Okay, so that's our second round of going around, kind of making those lines more precise where we want them. Oh, I forgot her ear here.
So the last thing on a sketch like this, I've only taken a few minutes to draw this. Last thing is, if you want to, you would go around and you make the really important lines darker. So the really important lines are things like the face and parts that are close to us. Like the wing kind of pops out towards us, the arm here is closer to us than this one, so you'd make this one darker, and this leg is darker, it's closer to us also. So that's the last thing to do, is just go around, and now you're making darker lines, pushing harder with your pen or pencil, just on the really important parts. Some of these I could also make darker, but I'm not going to make everything darker. It'll be nice to have some dark lines, some light lines, and some very light lines. Makes the drawing a little more interesting to look at when we have lots of different types of lines. What I really hope you remember from this video is to start your drawing light and start very simple. I only used light circles and ovals when I started out, and I didn't erase them. They're still there, you can still see them, but just barely because I drew really light, and then when I made my dark lines, you don't notice the light lines as much. And I think it kind of has a cool look that shows that a drawing takes work, and it's not like it's just effortless. It shows that there's actually some thought and careful planning that goes into it. So remember, start light, start very simple. I had circles and ovals. You might have triangles, squares, trapezoids, but those are simple shapes that you know how to draw, and you just look for those and start with those. Then once you've done as many of those simple things as you can, you start to make it a little bit more complicated, putting in more realistic lines and building those up from light to dark as you go. Just wait until you're really sure you know where you want something to be before you make it really dark. I know you can do this. Good luck, have fun. Can't wait to see your drawings.